Well, hey, everybody, we're going to get started right away. I mean, this is going to be one of those where it's going to be short and sweet. Juno and I have been brainstorming about how to give more to the membership since we did the clinics last fall, which we felt were really successful. So one of the things we thought we could do the last 4 weeks of the season is just give ideas on what you can do to finish out the season and finish out strong. So we had the idea that we would bring in a specialist and have our team as well just talk about what can be done. So I'm going to turn it over to Juno. There'll be time for some questions at the end. If you have a question in the middle, put it in a chat and I'll get to it. We'll serve it up to the panel. So we're going to do kind of a round table here. And Juno, go away.
All right, thank you, and thanks for being here. Like Chuck said, we're going to try to, give just some pointers maybe to think about what's going to happen because you have 4 more weeks. We're specifically talking about going to Ford Field, and that's going to be our focus. The biggest thing I would say is try to, going after last night. Obviously, I was at the Belden show, so a lot of incomplete shows are still being worked on, or still trying to be completed. But think about planning out the remainder of your season and not just like maybe daily rehearsals or weekly rehearsals. This way you have a goal to try to get to every week and build on that. If your performers are struggling, and there's nothing unusual about that in this particular situation that we're in, I would go very slowly because the key is going to be you're going to have to perform whatever you have out there. The best, even if it's simple, it's going to be about performance. It's so it's all about performance related issues. So try, I think Blair's going to cover this a little bit more, but try to keep some of the things that you already have and use some of the input that you might be getting from a Blair or a Dave or whoever it might be to try to still work within the frame that you already have there, and don't make any drastic things that might be beyond things that are going to make the show better, or might actually make it worse in some cases. Because if the kids aren't going to be able to have the performance quality, you're not really gaining anything in those, in those for instances. You can do that. I say this is pretty much how I've been out the last 4 or 5 weeks. And I know that I'm a visual guy, but I'm going to talk a little bit about music. A lot of the music, hopefully you can see my hand, it's kind of like this being played. It's kind of like straight. And you're going to hear this from probably everybody on this panel. And we're just looking for, just slight differences even. A little bit of musical texture, if you want to call it that. That's what we call it in visuals. So just kind of shape it a little bit, because you might be doing some cool visual stuff, but if the music doesn't connect to that, it's just very minimal. So try to get the kids to have the music as a priority. I mean, they have to know the music, especially when we have field judges too, because they're going to know if the students are not comfortable or not playing. So you're already behind the 8 ball because of the COVID season. We understand you've probably had tons of students out during class, probably kids missing during your night rehearsals. So, we do understand that. We're trying to take that into consideration as a judging community itself. So, hopefully we're doing a good job of that for MCBA. So if you can plan that out, that'd be a much better opportunity, I think, instead of trying to do things weekly, because when you start doing things weekly, sometimes you run out of time. But if you already have a schedule set, you have to stay to your own schedule to make it be successful. All right, that's the main thing. So musically, it's got to be very important to help the visual effect. I mean, it's a must. Without the music, I mean, that's what we're interpreting visually. So I mean, it has to have, you have to have that for sure, without a doubt. One exercise you can do, and this is kind of a strange one, and this might help you in ensemble. I say, just most directors like to love, they look at the band and that's what they're going to focus on 24/7. But do a whole song and just look at the color guard. See if they're in the best positions. You might have heard me say this last night. Hey, they're in a good spot there, but if they moved over 4 yards, it might even be better, or if they move this or whatever. So just those little minor tweaks do improve the production overall. So think about, what your performers can do, what your students can do. We're just giving a 7-minute dialogue to you based on one vision. We saw it one time. So what they can do and what can't be done. So just keep performance quality in mind. It helps all captions, all 6 captions. The performance quality is definitely going to help them all. Just to try to keep that in mind. The field obviously is going to be the caption that suffers the most. We understand that. I mean, you're trying to finish your show now. Are you going to be able to train your kids as well as you usually do? Probably not. I mean, we're accepting to that. I mean, everyone understands that. But just, try your best to get them to look as similar as possible on the field, play as well as they can on the field for the music people as well. All right. And there might be some parts in the show where you look at and you see them, it just isn't working. It might not be a bad idea to deduct something from it or take away something from it to make it a little bit easier, or take maybe a few people away from it. I explained that last night, I think, in critique that, everybody doesn't have to do everything all the time. Sometimes you can get away with a couple or a solo or a quintet or whatever it might be. So think about those things, and that'll help shape your music as well, because you're going to have different musical volumes, and hopefully the visual puts that all together for you. So that'll be the most important ones, I think, in the next. Don't try to get it all in 1 week. If you still have 3 minutes or 2 minutes to go, don't try to get it all done by, Portage Northern or Plymouth. I mean, that's really putting a lot on your kids, and that's not fair. So, just take time to develop it. It's important that the kids have it under their belt, because, the Ford field itself might be overwhelming to some of the students. What do we know? We don't know. So keep that in mind. I'm in Texas while I'm talking here. And I think that's pretty much my thing. I think Dave is probably going to jump in next.
I'll wait. I'm going to turn it over to Blair, because I know he's got a couple of things that are a little shorter, and then I can be a little long-winded. So I'll go after Blair.
Yeah. In particular, because of our guest today, Stephen, I do want to talk. I want to keep it a bit more geared towards music, but I wanted to touch a little bit on visual. In particular, a couple of topics, that we've seen kind of over the weeks as we've been out judging. And it's not just a Michigan thing, it's around the country. The same problems we might see or opportunities we might see here, we're seeing everywhere. So it's not a Michigan specific thing. So, but the first thing I want to talk about is kind of playing off what Juno was talking about molding the show. At this point in time, with only 4 weeks till the end of the season, you're probably in a couple of places. You're either trying to finish the show and getting those last few drill charts off before you can go back and really kind of mold things, or you're complete and you're trying to add, more vertical orchestration, adding things on top of it, or you're in the shaping and cleaning stages. Wherever you are in that process, it's probably to the point where you're not going to make major changes. And you should probably not hear that coming from adjudicators at this point in time, because we know there's a very limited time. If you're going to make those changes, it's probably going to happen this week. And then, going into the rest of the season, it's going to be about setting yourself up for championships, or if you're going beyond that. A couple of things that I've noticed, and it kind of plays off what Juno was talking about, is a lot about shaping, about musical shaping. One of the best ways I found to kind of work with that is put a set of headphones on something so you can't hear the music when they do a run through. Look at what you see and look for those moments that maybe there are some opportunities. Like if there's something where the drill gets very compressed, but the music is at one dynamic level, that's an opportunity for you. Compression equals tension, which is visual volume. So if you're able to maximize some dynamic efforts within that, then that's going to help, and that's going to play into the design analysis side, and it's going to play into the effect side as well, for two different reasons. But there's a lot of opportunities that can come with really kind of going through the show, looking for those opportunities. Even if you find maybe 4 or 5 moments in your entire show, and you can really maximize those effects and really get as much value out of them as possible, I think it's going to make a huge difference. The second thing on the visual side is, there's not a lot of time to go back and retrain your kids, but don't give up on your technique. Don't give up on the training. If you do block, one of the biggest mistakes you can make is saying, I have to get this drill done. We just don't have time to do basics anymore. Because what'll happen is it's not just that they won't get better, they'll actually regress. So you want to make sure you're at least for a couple of minutes every day do whatever foundational kind of training you do a couple of exercises. If you don't have a lot of time to do a lot, even if it's just one or two, just make sure that you keep going back and getting that, having them to kind of reassess their bodies. And that I think is going to help throughout the rest of the season. So when you get to the end, your technique is still where it was maybe when you think it was its strongest or it was its strongest. The last thing is don't ignore the color guard. The color guard is a great opportunity for your program. Sometimes we have limited amount of numbers. Sometimes we have large numbers. But whatever it is that you have, there are opportunities there. Just the same as you would do dynamically with music, you can do with the color guard.
Mhm.
Let's say a ballad, for example. There's a term we use in the color guard world called dynamic effort, which means you're stretching time. There's changes in speed, changes in energy. If you're not a color guard person, your color guard person should know what some of those terminology mean. But it's about, building those dynamics into the color guard work. And the easiest place to do it is in a ballad, just stretching their bodies, stretching that time a little bit, especially because a lot of people use big swing flags. That's a great opportunity to kind of really kind of become a bit more musical with the choreography, what's there, by using those different speeds to kind of gain that connection to the music. Be careful. One thing I've seen a lot around the country is color guard work will kind of stay the same, even when the music goes from being maybe softer and more legato to something that's very high energy or very staccato. Yet the guard work kind of stays in the same kind of choreography. If you're having hits, maybe you don't need all that hard work. Maybe you need the flags, just go hit, because it's just going to be a much stronger connection. But and in the next one we'll do, when Lee's here, we'll talk a little bit more and dig a little deeper into kind of refining your visual program, and detailing it, not so much rebuilding it, but detailing it as you go into the remainder of the season. But I just want to touch on a couple of things because, these are the things you want to think about right now, so that when you get into the last couple of weeks, it's much more about cleaning and getting that performance quality up in the ensemble. So.
I'm going to jump in and I'm going to add on to something that Blair just said. There's effect and clarity. So
Absolutely.
and I think that's something that you have to have in mind for the end of the season. Now is the time to look at that guard work. And if it's going to be work that they haven't done yet this year, they haven't been able to achieve it yet, it may be time for you to consider a minor change to make it something that's doable, so that at the end of the season, you get the effect that you want in that moment, that it is clear and clean. Because if it's not clear and clean, you will not have any effect achieved. So
yeah, couple easy places to do that are tosses. But that's the big one is, if you have a rifle line in your band and the choreographer has written a really high toss, a 5, and you have maybe a 60%, achievement level in that consistently, that might go up to a 70% when you get inside. You might want to rethink, and maybe that you're going to get more value out of it if it's a 3. So, those are the kind of things you can look at and go, that's an easy fix. I can take that toss down a little bit. We're going to get greater performance from it, and we're going to get greater value from it. So Chuck is absolutely right on.
I'm going to add to that. If they're practicing the 5 again and again and again and again, that takes them away from practicing other things that they need to practice. So if they're going to be tossing 3s, they got more time to practice other stuff. So there you go.
Yeah.
Dave, I think it's to you now.
Another trick that I've been seeing. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So what we'll do, because I know everyone's talking, I definitely want to get to Stephen. I'm going to kind of just pinpoint just a couple of small things. Mostly over the last 5 weeks, I've judged either on full of directors last night, and just as driving home and thinking about this, when it comes to electronics, over the next couple of weeks, if you have, again, with the smaller bands, what tends to happen, what I've been noticing is obviously the drill is written, a little bit more compressed, kind of keeping them in dash. When we've got wins of smaller numbers, what is typically happening is they're being drowned out at times by the sound systems. And again, some of it's just getting used to, balances. Some of the stadiums, like the stadium we were at last night, had no track, and they were right. It was difficult to hear a number of the bands throughout the show at times. And so as we go through the next couple of weeks, if you have the opportunity to have maybe a staff member, or even if it's the director, and I did this at times, and when I taught as well with my assistant, one of us would be in the back of the, during a show, would be up in the stands listening on the phone and just talking to the person running the system and just making those minor adjustments. I think at times, and again, we're coming off of many of us not having fielded a band in 2 years, that we want the pit to be heard. And most of the times the levels are just too high. So it affects, ensemble balance. It affects clarity. It affects general effect, because you can see things going on. You've got kids playing, but we're not able to hear everything gelling together. So as you go through the next 4 weeks, and most of the stadiums, I believe, are larger stadiums, larger venues. If you have that opportunity to start adjusting those levels, I would definitely suggest it. If you've got a smaller wind section, don't sacrifice the winds for the balance of, the pit. Pull the pit back, have the winds come up, have the kids play out more. Most of the times right now, the larger bands are playing extremely loud. So we hear the fortes, the double fortes fine, but the mezzo forte, piano, pianissimos, those softer levels are not being heard. And then vice versa with the smaller bands, we're hearing the softer levels, but the fuller volumes are just not at this time happening. And again, a lot of schools are still learning their shows. I've only seen 2 or 3 bands in Michigan that have had a complete show so far. So, obviously it comes with, consistency, reps, building confidence within the kids, because obviously as they learn stuff, you're still trying to clean and learn at the same time. So, there's a lot being thrown at them, especially with most groups having 2 sets of freshmen. The other thing before I turn it over to Stephen, the one thing that I've noticed over the last couple of weeks, and this ties into both ensemble and effect, is making sure that this is the time where you should start looking at every moment musically. And if you've got more than one thing going on, because there's a number of groups that have things that are pretty at times densely scored. So you may have 1 or 2 melodies, a main melody, a counter melody, a rhythmic motive, and then a harmonic supportive motive going on. And everybody's playing at the same volume. So you've got a lot of energy, but we're not hearing all the lines. So start looking at those moments, listen to your tapes. And again, I would suggest over the next 4 weeks or 3 weeks, go to critique, because every adjudicator is going to be, talking about these things. And as we get closer and closer and closer, our commentary is going to hopefully be a little bit more pinpointed and a little bit more specific than more broad range things. But just talking with all the directors last night in critique, it's about primary, secondary, and so forth. And then, there might be parts of the show musically, those supportive moments where you might just be able to cut certain sections out just to bring up the clarity. And sometimes, and again, every composer is different, every arranger is different with scoring. But I can't remember a year with any of my groups where we didn't go through starting in October and just start axing things, because we're hearing the same things over and over again after every week. And, sometimes it's just removing certain sections just to let those melodic voices, come forth. And again, that's going to help you in ensemble, and it's also going to help you in effect, because right now, those are the areas, right, that balance and blend right now. Those are the things that are lacking at times with every group. There's not one group that's not having that issue right now that I've seen in the last 5 weeks. But just start looking at those things. As you're obviously teaching the closer or wherever you're at in the show, start finding those points as you're getting to there with what you've already learned. And then even sometimes just looking ahead, going, all right, I've got 4 weeks. We still have 2 weeks to get the stuff on the field. What can we adjust and fix slightly to make our lives that much easier as we get to Ford Field? So those are just things that I've seen over the last couple of weeks, but I definitely, with the time that we have, want to turn things over to Stephen, because he's been all across the country. And if you're not aware, he's probably got some of the best ears in the business. So I'm just going to turn it over to Stephen.
Thank you. So I'm going to go real fast so that if anybody has questions, they can throw that out. But I've been out 6 weekends now, if you count a preview show in August. So I've seen groups in Kentucky and Indy, in Kansas City, Missouri, Arkansas, yesterday, Mississippi. And so I'm gonna put in the chat. I'm categorizing top groups, and you can decide is your group a top group. I'm talking about you're in the running for state championship. If you're going to a regional, you're going to make finals. That type group. And then we're going to say that here's a lower developing group, like a group that is happy just to be putting a show on the field. The fact that you're going to have 6 minutes and kids are going to not be running into each other, that's success for you this year. And I get that. And then we get this mass in the middle. Here's this middle 50, 60%. You're not making finals at Grand Nats, but your kids know what they're doing and it's happening. All right. So those are our 3 categories. And here in the chat are kind of my thoughts. All right. So if you're a top group, and I've heard this, I've probably heard about, I think I've heard 2 Grand Nats finalists and probably 8 or 10 that would be in the semifinals discussion. In those top groups, you've got kids that are so hyped and they are messing up ensemble moments because they are playing too much. It's happening a lot with percussion, bottom bass drummers, and snare kids. It's happening a lot. It's also happening a lot with brass kids. I think part of it is pandemic related because, and you can think about your own rehearsals, kids in July were so different than kids are right now. An October 21 student is so different than a July 21 student. And so these kids that were just really struggling 3 months ago, they're not struggling now. And now sometimes they're overplaying, and there's some cool ensemble moments that are getting wrecked because those kids are new. They're new musicians and they're going for it. If you can get those kids, the groups that I've seen that are, box 4 groups, that's their problem. A really cool ensemble moment is messed up because some kid is just playing too much. They're not aware of a dynamic shift and they blow right through it. All right. So middle groups, this is a lot of people. The breath points thing is a big deal. And there'll be moments where everyone in the room or everyone on the field is thinking about, here comes a step off, here comes a step off, 15, 16, go. And they're really thinking about that. And in rehearsal, you're watching that step off. All the kids are thinking about that step off. They're going to get that step off. And half the kids are blowing through 13, 14, 15, 16, 1. And then half the kids are going 13, 14, 15, 1. And that discrepancy is a big problem. And honestly, right now, I would just say take the breath, unless you're trying to push out that Texas group for that last spot on Saturday night in Indy, then take that breath. When you're comparing box 5 to box 5, then a long 30 count phrase beats a 16 count phrase. But if you're comparing this group and who is going to be 3rd at state finals compared to 4th, the group that's clean is going to be 3rd. And we're not talking about massive phrases. If most people are breathing on count 16 before the step off, then let's all breathe on count 16. All right, that next thing where I put for the middle groups, clarify slur tongue. There's 3 or 4 bands that I've been to rehearsals throughout the year. And back in July, we were just happy to have kids playing. And there were lots of 11th and 12th graders, strong musicians that were like, they were sitting there, they were going for it. And the rest of the room eighth graders and freshmen and even sophomores, maybe not really ever marked. So a lot of sophomores are still kind of rookies this year. They weren't really playing at all. So our first ensemble moments back in the band room or the cafeteria back in July, those were all kind of led by these strong musicians. And we were just happy to have those kids playing. And then we're working on getting the third chair trumpet playing. Here's the fourth chair trombone. Now we're all adding in. Cool. And what happened is those strong players, if you had a da-da-da-da, some of those strong players started playing it back in July, and they slurred the whole thing. And then you have a few kids that have learned it, eighth graders that are starting to become stronger, ninth graders, they started playing da-da-da-da-da. And you've started thinking about this whole nother aspect. You've totally forgotten the fact that you've got 7 trumpets and there are 3 different articulation styles in this one phrase. And if you just listen to it, you're like, holy cow, here's this all region 11th grader that plays great and they are totally playing the wrong articulation. Or maybe they're playing it right. And these 9th graders that are growing and becoming great musicians, now they're not matching. Let's all do it the same way. And, cleaning an articulation, just making a kid aware of that, or making a kid aware that we're going to breathe on 16, we're not connecting this phrase, that can happen in 5 minutes. That's not like a week-long rehearsal plan. That's like, everybody stop right now. We're going to breathe on 16 before the step off. And then when one kid doesn't do it, we all reset. We're going to do it again. We're going to do it again. You all breathe 16. There's only one kid not do it. Now we've all got it. Now we go on. And that's frustrating. But once they do it and they realize you're serious, then that is fixed, and hopefully that stays fixed. For the developing groups, the groups that are still like, on the way to becoming stronger performers, I think it's okay to be like, all right, first 15 minutes, we're doing fundamentals every day. And if you're a warm up, you really can't get away from that horn arc time, the drums just playing eights, just like basic drop spins. Yes, every kid can do it, but can they do it with the metronome? And if you tell the kids that by us doing this, it's going to make every part of the show better, you can almost kind of like manipulate their emotions like we all do so much, and tell them, all right, we're going to do fundamentals for 5 minutes every day, metronomes on, everyone's feet are in time, and your upper body is going to look strong. And if you tell them that, then you can convince them that you're going to be a better marcher because we're doing this every single day, first 5 minutes. Metronome starts, 8 counts, you're in, and we're doing 8s and 8s up the field. If you can get that in their head, those 15 minutes will affect every part of the show, not just one detail that you think you need to clean. Upper bodies right now are really weak, and just in general, like looking at bands, there's kids that can't get their feet in time, but sometimes those kids aren't fixable, but upper bodies are weak, and that's affecting the music. Like kids are playing poorly because their upper bodies are weak. And I think if there's anything, a kid can still play well if their feet are out of time. We've all known that really great musician that's a 9th grader that loses focus. They don't march well all the time. If they keep their upper body still, that's gonna make a big difference. One other thing that I think you should do at some point during the run through this week is face away. I'm typing this, sorry. Face away during a run through. That way you're not going to watch anything that happens. You're going to turn around, they're going to do the entire ballad, and you're not going to look at them at all. You're not going to notice a single visual thing. You're going to really hear, you're going to hear totally differently because you're not watching this one step off and you're not watching this one guard sequential. You are just listening, and you're going to turn around and do that during a run through one time. I think that will make, that'll make a big difference. That's all I've got, y'all. That was a lot of information in just a few minutes, but that's all I got.
All right. Anybody have any questions from the, no?
Let me also throw in, if you're still learning your closer, there should not be anything new in that closer. If you're going to throw some body work into an impact point, it should be body work that they've already done, that they've already learned. It's too late to teach new vocabulary. That goes for when the guard's learning their last 30 seconds of show. That goes for when you're handing out parts for the drum book. That goes for the horn line. If there's something that they can't already do in another setting, it's too late. You got to teach them that in January, February, and then put it into next year's show. There can't be new vocabulary tossed out in October.
That goes along with what Dave Armbruster was saying. Dave was saying you can change things in the show by cutting things out. That's an easy change to do. Adding things at this point in time, adding things to the music, you're asking for trouble if you're going to do anything of significance.
Yeah, can I jump in?
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, Blair and I have talked about this because we judged together on about 3 or 4 weekends already together. Even the top bands have modified their skill sets down to maybe 5 or 6 different things that they're doing with the body layering, but they kind of expand that, but they still have the fundamental of those 5 skills, and then they just expand on it just slightly. Do you agree with that, Blair?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's a trick too. And I think that's what Steve is trying to say is you probably already have something in your show in the first 4.5 minutes or whatever that you could just slide into the end of the show, but just do it. It doesn't have to be drastically different. There's a lot of kids on the field most of the time. A slight difference will make a difference upstairs as well as downstairs.
Yeah, and it could be as simple as something like if you've taught them how to do a proper lunge, and you may have a section where they in one count they lunge to the right and then they come back. But in the ballad, you're trying to add maybe some layers to it. They can do that same skill at a much slower rate, and it's a new skill. It's the same skill. They understand the distribution of the weight, where the shape of the body is, but you can expand that by doing it in a different way. And I think that's a good point, both Stephen and Juno. I do have one question for Stephen though, and maybe either Dave or Stephen can ask this. I know from the visual perspective, some of the comments we give when there's balance issues with voiceovers. Can you talk about kind of the soundscape a little bit? Stephen, how you address some of those challenges in the soundscape?
To me, if there's a voiceover, there can't be anything else melodic happening. Yesterday, I heard a great flute solo and a voiceover at the same time. If a voiceover is really key to the narrative of the show and some like emotional journey you're taking us on, then that's got to be the main thing. That's got to be turned up loud enough to where everyone understands the lyrics or the words, and you've got to have the treble really high, or else it's just going to sound like a muffle in the mix. But if it's not necessary to like the narrative of the show and us understanding some emotional journey, then I think you can almost do without the voiceover. I think a lot of times that detracts from artistry and musicianship and everything that's on the right side of a music sheet. Sophistication, artistry, professionalism, that stuff is missed if the voiceover is getting in the way of some great pit opportunities.
Yep, he nailed it.
Yeah, the other thing I might say about the voiceover as well is, we all know that Michigan weather can be a challenge in the next few weeks. So it's important, and obviously you're not going to add a lot at this point, but if that voiceover is not there, are we still going to be able to understand what you're trying to speak to us about? Are we going to understand the concept? It may not be as clear, but if there's something there that can still speak to the concept or speak to the whatever you're trying to communicate to us, I think that's important. Sometimes that could be the flag you chose or the way that you approach the music or the visual journey. But a lot of times when the audio comes out, that's when a lot of questions come up about, I'm not quite sure what I'm seeing. And typically it's because the electronics didn't work. And then you ask the questions about, are you relying solely on the voiceover, with a little teeny speaker on the front sideline, which may not be able to project all that well in Ford Field to carry your program. So,
Dave Armbruster, did you see that? There's a chat question in the chat.
Let me see.
Dave, you read it, and I'll kind of explain my part of this.
Okay, it says, I'm new to my district. This year, my band camp was very, very late in the summer. We are behind. I'm debating only focusing on music for my last movement and standing still to perform it. I've been told to focus on music by more than 10 people, so I know they are right. I just don't want to be penalized for standing still and playing one movement because I took the advice and I agree with their advice. That's a great question. I, you know, it's a, you know, all I can say is none of us have ever dealt with a pandemic. And we are all, every program, I don't care how strong a program is right now, everybody has been struggling. Some are able to hide it better than others, but every program is dealing with issues. I've had one school that said, yeah, we lost the drum line out for COVID for a full week and a half, and these things are going to happen. The nice thing is that with this year, that every program in MCBA makes it to state championships. For me personally, you need to do what is best for you and your kids. And if you have to stand still for the closer, you stand still for the closer. There's not going to be a penalty. There's not going to be we're not going to, obviously when you're in competition with other groups that are completed, there's going to be a little bit of obvious numbers management. But the thing is, you have to do what is going to make, everybody in your program life as easy and stress-free as possible. And every adjudicator that we have in the state, every adjudicator that we bring in, we all have been in this together. We understand. And that's one of the things that if I, out-of-state judging that I've done, in-state judging, everybody's talked about this. Take into consideration, we don't know what everybody's been dealing with. We know the background because we've all been through there, but just give as much feedback, positive feedback, constructive criticism, obviously, because we all have room to grow and fix and clean. But you're going to have to do what's best for your band program, and just know, yes, John.
Yeah, let me just jump in. I think if you have 2/3 of your show done and you're able to work and make 2/3 of your show pretty good, and then you stood and played the last minute, that would be better than having all of your show unprepared and not good. Essentially, you would end up with none of your show good if you tried to put that closer on the field, because you'd spend so much time just getting that to just a level that you could just kind of get through it. So then you would just be getting through all of your show. So if you made 2/3 of the show pretty good, and then you stood and played the closer pretty well, then that's pretty successful. I think that's the best alternative.
Mm-hmm.
And you said in there, I don't want to be penalized for this. You don't get penalized for anything. You don't get credit for what you don't do. But if you did 2/3 of the show well, you would get good credit for 2/3 of the show.
Perfect.
Obviously, if you're standing and playing that last half of the show, or that closer visually, the comments, they can still talk about body technique, carriage. I mean, obviously they may be repeating it, but get to that last set, stand and look confident. Stand and look confident, and just tell us this is the end of the show. Regardless, this is how we have it planned, and just play confidently. And let's call it a year. And it's yes, Stephen.
I'm going to throw in real quick, Brendan. I think if you did 1 or 2 drill moves to get wherever you are at the moment visually, get them to a really good musical setup that's kind of like a fancy looking arc, and you get the battery and the basses kind of near the back center. Do like 1 or 2 drill moves to put them into kind of a concert set, and then maybe you don't do like the full 2-minute closer. Maybe you do like a minute of it, because really what everyone should be going for right now is that we want these kids to sign up for our class again next year. And whatever you're going to do to give them a feeling like this was a good life experience, their parents feel like it's a good life experience, and they want their child to buy your product again next year. And probably that's going to mean you stand and play the last minute of the show so that they feel great when they get done at the end of the season, whether that's October. And then when class signups come again, they look back in their brain. How did I feel? I like that. I'm signing up for that class again.
And I'm going to add one other thing. If you're worried about leaving a good impression in the music judge's ears, a whole lot better for you to play with a great sound at the end of the show than to play with a sound at the end of the show with something you're struggling with.
Mhm.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yep.
You know, at the end of the day, you do what's best for you and your kids and your program. You know, and
All right.
that's
There are
That's-
too
that's all we
many
can do.
bands doing too much drill. I mean, we said it all last night at Critique. You're doing 65 pages of drill. You can't do that. You can't perform that. You know, it's going back to pre-pandemic.
Exactly.
You know, just do what you can do and do it well.
All right. Well, I think
I think there's, you know, and that's great. And that is probably questions. Does anybody have any other questions? Feel free to ask.
I would mind asking a question.
Yes, Ryan.
Go ahead.
All right. So you guys are saying basically we're at the time of the season where we should not be adding in body. I mean, I've kind of got a week before homecoming, and then after that, I got to start cleaning. So after that, no more body. We're just cleaning drill. I mean, I've still got kids who are like feet are out of step and stuff, and I don't know. What do you? I mean, should I just add in a couple of basic things like some lunges and some ripples and things, and then just clean from there?
Yeah, I kind of like what Stephen was playing off of. If there's something that you've already done, like a lunge or something early in the show where they know how
We've
to
done
do
no
it.
body work yet, so
Yeah, well, you do simple things.
Yep.
Things that there's not a large learning curve that you can teach in a day. Because you're right. Once you get past this weekend, especially if you have a homecoming now coming up, and then you have a couple of weeks until championships, it's going to be important to do whatever you think is going to be best for your kids to feel comfortable. If that means you're going to spend a lot of time cleaning what you have so they're comfortable with the drill, they're in step, you're going to get more value than that than you're going to add a bunch of,
being dirty
lunges and dance moves. There's far, like Tuck was saying earlier, there's far more value in clarity than there is stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
all right. Well, this is about as long as we wanted to make this. I hope everybody's gotten something out of this evening. We're going to do 3 more of these next week. It's Lee Carlson, right, Juno?
That's correct.
So it'll be a little more of a visual focus next week, and hope everybody comes back. This video is going to be available on the website, and if you pass it on to other people that we covered, what we covered tonight, and invite them next week, and invite them to come to the video. Anybody have anything last words?
If there's anything like specific that maybe a director wants to hear about next time or in 2 weeks, because like Chuck said, we're going to do it, please contact Chuck, myself, Dave, or Blair. Can you specifically cover something like this, because I'm having this constant problem every week or whatever it may be. So we can maybe try to help you focus in a little more, try to give you some pointers or whatever it might be to try to assist. Again, I think everybody knows I'm a pretty firm believer. It's always going to be about the student, always going to be about the kid. So make them be, as successful as possible. And only you as a director know what that is.
All right. Great. Thanks everybody for being here. Great night, Stephen. Thank you very much. Hope to see you next week.